I've been on this series, The Road to Recovery. This is now the 13th week, and that's why we call it a road to recovery, because everything we do around here takes us down a long road before we get to it. But anyway, and we have focused on, basically for the last several weeks, this commentary that we have in the book of Mark stating that Jesus at one time said, "They who believe in my name will lay hands upon the sick or the infirm," infirm being those with the inability to produce results. And I keep emphasizing this because I want us to understand this is not just about physical healing. It's about the inability to produce results in any area of our lives, which of course grabs each and every one of us right now around the throat and says, "That's you," right? We all have areas of our life where we are unable to produce the results that God originally intended for man to be able to experience in his life. So the word goes like this: they who believe in my name will lay hands upon the infirm, and they who believe in my name will recover. And as I said before, I know that I have taken a license with the text, if you're reading it literally off of that particular page, because I've added, "They who believe in my name will recover." And I've put it in both places, and on the text, I know you only find it in one place. But I've been doing this for 40 years now, and I'm going to tell you, those who believe in his name recover. And we're going to talk about what that means a little bit more today. But anyway, we want to talk about, as I did a little bit last week, the predictable nature of the law of recovery. So many people have said, "Well, I've just seen so many people around me fail that I've given up believing that healing, that recovery, that wholeness is actually a possibility in this life." And that's the reason I took this particular course on. And that's one of the things that I have believed in for 40 years now, that when Jesus said something, he's speaking as the creator of the world. He's speaking as the creator himself in the flesh. And so I believe that when he says something, there is validity to it. There is truth in it. And if we haven't discovered how to function within that truth, it's our problem, not his, but it doesn't change his word from being true. So if, in fact, Jesus did say, "They will lay hands on the sick and the sick will recover," then there has to be a way to understand that to where we can embrace recovery so that we can live our life to the fullest and the best expression of life that God has for us while we remain here in this dimension of life. Anyway, so as I said, we've been discussing this under the terminology, you might say, of the law of recovery. We've been talking about this law of recovery as it pertains to the totality of our personal environment. In other words, again, not just the healing of our bodies from a physical thing, but obviously that as well, but recovering the environment that the Father ordained for each and every one of us. Now, when I use that word environment now, I'm not talking about the environmental issues around us in the world. Those are of major concern, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about our personal environment. The thing that I refer to when I remind you that when God said in the beginning, "Let us make man in our image according to our likeness and let them have dominion over all the earth." And then in the 28th verse of Genesis chapter 1, it said, "Then God blessed them and said, 'Be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, subdue it, and have dominion over it.'" And as I've told you, that the first earth that I would believe that the Father had in mind was your personal earth. This house of clay, this earth that is your family, that is your business, that is your realm of influence, your realm of dominion. I don't have dominion in your realm, but I have dominion in mine, in the sense of I have dominion authority over what goes on in my own life. You don't, I do. And I don't have it over you, you do, I don't, right? And so we've talked about our earth. Marilyn and I share an earth. We share an earth, with our 6 dirt bags, our children, and all of our little grandchildren, and so on and so forth. We have a large area of influence given to us, a large privilege of influence. Dominion, of course, as I've said so many times, means privilege. It means influence. It doesn't mean domination. It doesn't mean control. It doesn't mean, to lord over people. It means to have the privilege of influencing others within your earth. And we take that very seriously in our home, in our marriage. And so, but anyway, so we've been talking about this law of recovery as it applies to the totality of our personal environment, right? Now, when we speak of recovery in general, we're usually referring to getting beyond this present negative circumstance, whatever it is. I need to get delivered from this thing. This thing is whatever it is. It's been riding me around like a horse, and I'm ready to get out from under it, or have it get out from under me, or whatever, But anyway, and while that's important, I really believe that Jesus is referring to something much larger. I think that Jesus is suggesting something more far-reaching, and that is this. And I'm kind of rushing through this because I've talked about some of this before, but that true recovery isn't so much focused on the moment, right, as it is about breaking away from the victimizing beliefs and expectations of others, of the world. I think this is the greatest concern that Jesus has as he speaks these words, that we be broken free, that we recover from being subject in our own imagination to the victimizing, expectations and beliefs of others. In other words, whatever the medical profession says, that's the final word. And you haven't got any other choices. You can't do anything but just submit to that and go up with it. Whatever you're told about your value in life, whatever you're told about, your significance in life, there's nothing you can do about that. That's the final word. That's what I'm saying. See, those are the victimizing beliefs and expectations that people have for us, that the world has for us. And I believe that when Jesus said, lay hands on the infirm and they will recover, he has this bigger thing in mind. He has this bigger recovery concept in mind. In other words, let me say it this way. Those beliefs that will return to you time after time, to possess your moments with undesirable. Does that make sense to you? That's what I really believe Jesus has at the core of what he's saying, at the base of it, at the foundation of it, is that we need to be recovered from the victimization attitude, first of all, that we so easily take upon. There's nothing I can do about this. This is heredity in my family. This is what the world offers me. This is what the present condition of the government is really placing upon me. Well, you see, all of those things are things in which we need to go back always, and maybe you think I'm oversimplifying, but we need always to go back to Psalm 91 that says 1,000 may fall at your side and 10,000 at your right hand. And if you are abiding in the secret place of the Most High, it shall not come near you. That seems like that's unreasonable, Lord. You don't understand. Yes, he did understand. Now, I realize it was the psalmist that wrote that, but the point is we need to be able to, I believe, take upon the understanding that Jesus had when he said, no one takes my life from me. I lay it down of myself, I take it up of myself. And as we've seen, Paul later on echoed the same words, He said, I don't know whether I'd rather live or die. He said, boy, for me to die would be better. To go on and be with the Lord, that would be the better thing. But you need me here. I'm just paraphrasing, obviously, what he says over in Philippians. But you need me here, and so I know. You said, I know? Yeah, I know that I will live on for your benefit. See, Paul was understanding that he had control over his own environment. That he would have to choose to lay down his life, that no one could take it from him. See, he understood that Jesus was not just communicating something supernatural and divine about himself, but that he was actually communicating to humanity, hey, listen, you've been allowing your environment, your personal environment, to be dictated to you by the world, by a world that does not understand the love of the Father, their inclusion in the Father's greatness and his love. See, it's time for us to pull things in. That's what he's saying to us. And I'm here to demonstrate to you. And you see, we understand as we read through the Gospels and the epistles, that those who wrote after him and who wrote in testimony and witness to his life all began to agree with that same concept. And see, somehow it's gotten away from us over the years. It's gotten away from us, and we've come back to seeing ourselves as victims. We may not use that word victim, but when we say, whatever will be, or there's nothing I can do about it, or what can we do? Well, we are neglecting Jesus, Son of Man. We are neglecting the demonstration of the Son of God as the Son of Man, telling us, showing us how we were to live within our environment, right? Okay. All right, so as I said, so I believe that when Jesus talks about recovery, he's talking about this bigger thing. He's talking about, recovering, recovering our persuasion or our beliefs in the intended condition of man in his personal environment. I think that's what Jesus wanted. He wanted that thing, you see, that led us into the moments of needing recovery. He wanted us to deal with that thing. Go to the root. Let's go to the root of this thing. Yes, I want you well physically. Yes, I want you well emotionally. But let's talk about what it is that contributes to the breakdown. Let's talk about what it is that has brought about the tangible infirmity in your life. Because it's not something that just popped out of the sky. It's not something that just fell on you out of a tree. See, there's something behind all of this humanity, and I, as the Son of Man, want to explain that to you and demonstrate it to you in the way I live my life around you and with you and among you, see? Okay? All right, so as I believe Jesus is really wanting us to recover, as I said, our belief or our persuasion in the intended condition of man, because you see, that recovery will ultimately cover your moments with life and blessing. Isn't that right? Okay. Now, consequently, I also believe, as I've said before, that in Mark 16:18, Jesus was instructing believers in so much more than what charismatic Christianity has turned into quick-touch Christianity. Lay hands on the sick, lay hands on the sick, lay hands on the sick. And I like to keep refreshing you with this, and this will be the final time probably, but I want to remind you that these words taken together in the Greek, lay hands on the sick, they will recover. Lay hands on the infirm, they will recover. In the Greek, you expand all these words out, and this is what they mean. Take a firm grasp or hold. That's a little bit different than quick touch, right? Refer to taking a firm grasp or a hold on unbelievers. But by unbelievers, we mean the unpersuaded. See? Among us, the unpersuaded. Among the world, the unpersuaded. So when I talk about an unbeliever, I'm not talking about in the old us and them mentality of the evangelical church, where them out there are unbelievers and we in here, regardless of how carelessly and foolishly and wasted our lives might be while we proclaim to be Christians, we're the believers. No, we're not. We're unpersuaded of many things as well. That's why we live the lives we live. While we label ourselves Christians and put bumper stickers on our car and despise this and despise that and judge this and judge that and condemn this and condemn that, and we call ourselves believers, see? Well, we're unbelievers too. So let me go back to this definition of lay hands on the infirm, because a lot of us have been so infirm. I can tell you, my infirmities are still many. But when I look back at the infirmities of my life in judging others and condemning others and having a me and them mentality, I realize there's been a great deal of recovery that's been taking place in my life. I'm not where I want to be. I'm not where I need to be, I'm sure, right now. But you see, I'm recovering. I'm beginning to understand something about humanity that had been hidden from me in the doctrines that I had allowed myself to be washed with over the years, right? So anyway, let's go back to this. So laying hands on the infirm refers to taking a firm grasp or hold on the unpersuaded, committing ourselves to them as their servants. You ever heard anything in the Gospels that suggested we should be the servants of others? Of course you have, right? And so Jesus is just saying this in another way. taking a firm grasp or hold on the unpersuaded, committing ourselves to them as their servants for the express purpose of superimposing the order and arrangement of the gospel over their destructive expectations and beliefs. Whether you realize it or not, one of the things that I've been doing for the last 13 weeks is trying to superimpose the revelation of the gospel over our destructive beliefs, over those destructive persuasions that we've carried in our life of how things must be, right? Now, I don't want to say that standing up here speaking and preaching on a Sunday is making myself a servant to you. I'm not going that far, but what I'm saying is all of these aspects we need to understand. This is what Jesus was saying. In other words, he wasn't saying, line them up and hit them on the forehead and go back to the back room while the band plays. You've done your job. You say, well, I've been to meetings where people have done that and people have actually been healed. Yeah, so have I. But I think that falls more upon the person who came up with an expectation of being made well than it does actually speaks to the administration of that. Because you see, God's will for us, for all of mankind, has always been to embrace one another and be one another's servants. And that's another demonstration of the Son of Man that we were intended to pick up on. We were intended to read through the Gospels and as we walk through the Gospels with Jesus, pick up on the idea that he was not a dominator, but he was a servant. Right? Well, everybody's excited about this. I used to say to Marilyn years ago, if every pastor, of course, we came out of a strict word of faith, domination system, if you will, where there was a fivefold ministry that was very dominant, and you were to know that. And I used to say to Marilyn, if every pastor had to take the word pastor off of his door in his church office and write servant up there, we'd have people vacating the ministry in busloads. That's really the truth. I mean, that was what we were familiar with. Now, I'm not saying that every pastor you've ever had, was not a servant. I just mean that was something that was very, very big in the Word of Faith movement, the early grace movement back in the 60s and 70s and 80s, And anyway, so again, I'm going to keep saying this. So lay hands on the sick. Take a firm hold on an unpersuaded individual, committing yourself to them as their servant for the purpose of superimposing the order and arrangement of my gospel over their destructive beliefs. That's the amplified version of lay hands on the sick and they will recover. But you see, Jesus guaranteed in that there would be recovery in people that were treated with that kind of dignity, that were treated with that kind of value and importance, that you would actually wrap yourself around them, so to speak, not to judge them, not to condemn them, not to have I am the corrector of the foolish attitude, right? But to serve them in such a way as to help them become persuaded once again of the goodness of God, right? Of the goodness of God. Because boy, has the church gone a long ways in extracting the concept of the goodness of God right out of the hearts of men. All right, so in other words, he wasn't saying line them up. He was saying don't line them up. Get involved in redirecting their beliefs so as to recover the goodness of Abba in their experience. And as I've said before, Jesus wants every man to know. I said this in a little rougher way last week, and I think some people were displeased with the way I said it, but oh well. But Jesus wants every man to know that each one of us, each and every man, is free to choose and develop his own life course, his own environment, never the victim, always the architect, and always independent of accepted expectations, beliefs, and limitations. That's the gospel. Now, I can see that many of us can hear that right away in a good, freeing way, and I think, the way I said it last week, people were a little bit offended because they thought maybe I was suggesting it was okay for people to choose a life course or a lifestyle that was in disagreement with our church or the church or a church. Yeah, I was saying that. So if it offended you, twice offended. But that's not the only thing I'm saying. I'm saying what we've been seeing throughout this is that Jesus was actually condoning men constructing their own environment. Be it unto you according as you believe, according to your faith. You have that freedom to do so. You have the freedom to destroy your life. You have the freedom to create an abundant, a beautiful life. You have the freedom to live differently than your brother or your sister. You have because you see, that's the love of the Father. Total freedom. And you see, where we get confounded is we begin to decide that what is right for me must be right for you, right? We do it in religion all the time. We do it in doctrine all the time. That's why we have so many doctrinal divisions in the church. We do it in doctrine because what we believe is what you must believe in order to be correct, right? Well, we do that too in every other aspect of our life. It's like I was saying to you last week, God created man. God created a couple, we're told. We'll take that as a literal function right now. So God created a couple, not so that my joys and her joys had to be exactly the same. Marilyn would have been free had we been that original couple in this garden of innocence, in this perfect world. Her joys would not have to have been subject to my joys. Her imaginations would not have had to be my imaginations, and likewise. But you see, what God did was he gave us this freedom so that we could come alongside one another in life and we could compound our joy, compound our imaginations, see beyond, right? Imagine beyond, experience abundance in a way that we don't very often experience abundance, right? But what we've done is, we've decided that here's the way it must be. It's got to be my way because I just can't understand your way. See what I'm saying? Well, anyway, I know that's really ministering to you, I can tell. So anyway. But see, this is the gospel that Jesus is saying. Every man, each one is free to choose and develop his own life course, his own environment. Never the victim, always the architect of your environment. Boy, if we could get rid of that one thing, if we could really get rid of that one thing, victim, if we could dismiss that from our life. I'm not the victim of anything or anybody, anywhere, at any time. We got to get a hold of that. We got to get a hold of that. I'm not the victim of genetics. I'm not the victim, of society. I'm not the victim of abuse. I'm not the victim of this. I'm not the victim of that. Now, obviously, when we're talking about a child being abused, I don't mean it that way. I don't have to maintain the mentality of victimization. I need to be able to, at some point in life, be encouraged to rise up and say, no more. I'm not going to allow what happened to me, even as a child, to continue to dominate my persuasions and my beliefs so that I live on as this beat up, beat down, defeated adult, right? Obviously, yes, there is a place to consider somebody, especially a child, as a victim or someone that is things are being withheld. But I tell you, there's such a thin line. And we have just fallen over into this so easily, the church has, into being victims of everything. And I think Jesus had something different to say. He said, be it unto you according to your faith. What would you have me do for you? Oh, that I might receive. Well, be it unto you according to your faith, right? According to your persuasion. That's what he said. And he said, and you're free to be persuaded any way you want to be persuaded. I'm not trying to dictate to you how you need to be persuaded. All right, well, let's go on with this. All right. So recovery or breaking away, necessarily begins with new thought processes or the willingness to engage new thought processes. And this is where we have hit a wall in the church. We struggle against new thought processes. We come up with words, or not come up with words, but we use words like heresy and heretic. Anytime somebody tries to introduce a new thought process, even though we have been stumbling along in the same dead religious experience, maybe for 50 years, see, even though we have been living a life that does not resemble in any way freedom or joy or victory, and yet when someone comes along and begins to try to introduce, now you people aren't like this, I know this because you're still here. Right? No, I mean, you know, we've had such a run of new thought being brought through this fellowship by so many people back over the last several years, beginning with Baxter and Brad and all the people that have come through here, and Francois and all the people that have come in and said something that hadn't been said before in our own thinking, right? And you're still here, so I commend you. But here's the thing, we've really got to make this very personal in this aspect too. As I said, you know, recovery or breaking free begins with engaging new thought processes, right? Being willing to, all right? Because thought patterns, as we know, they create a momentum. Thought patterns, I'm not talking about just a single thought that flits into your mind and goes away, but thought patterns that we fall into, they create a momentum that, as I said last week, using gravity as creates its own magnetic force. It's what some people in the world refer to as the law of attraction, right? And the law of attraction seems to be kind of relevant to, Proverbs 23:7, as a man thinketh within himself, so is he, right? It sounds like as a man thinks on, meditates on, ponders on, he attracts it to himself. Or he remains in that situation, whatever it is. So, and then I'm going to go back over a few of these because we touched on them just at the end last week. You know, the New Covenant writers, they spoke over and over to us, you know, about the thought processes that we entertain. Jesus himself said over in Matthew 15, out of the heart come evil thoughts. And then in the next verse, whichever verses it was, it said, these are what defiles a man. Out of the heart come evil thoughts. See, Jesus led the parade on talking to us about our thought processes. He said, out of your heart comes evil thoughts, evil communications. And these are what defiles a man. It's not what goes into the mouth that defiles the man. It's in that passage of Scripture over there where he talks about that. So we need to realize that thoughts are unspoken words that affect our lives. How many of you have lost any sleep just this week, laying awake thinking about something that kind of consumed you? Now, you're all going to be a bunch of liars out there. I have, okay? I lose sleep every week, foolishly, laying awake with thoughts running through my mind that I have no control over anyway. Right? No, the rest of you? Okay, somebody, thank you for that one amen over here. No. So what I want to communicate here is that thoughts are unspoken words that affect our lives. I don't lay there and talk out loud. If I wake her up, I'm in trouble. So they're unspoken, but they're thoughts, and they have effect on my life. Now, sometimes they're good thoughts, and sometimes they just keep me awake because I'm thinking about doing something profitable or good with my grandkids or something, you know, and I'm excited about it. But I'm talking about this other stuff, right? All right, now, you know Romans 12:2, so I won't make you turn there. Do not be conformed to this world, but rather be transformed. That's a good one when we think about it. Don't be conformed to this world. That's really what we're talking about here. Don't accept and put your trust in and walk along in what the world says you must walk along in, right? But be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Now, the word mind there is a word that means intellect. Means intellect. So we have our intellect involved. And then let's go back over to Philippians 4:8. He says, finally, brethren, whatever things are true, whatever things are noble, whatever things are just, whatever things are pure, whatever things are lovely, whatever things are good report, if there's any virtue and if there's anything praiseworthy, meditate on these things. He says meditate. The word means consider. It means to ponder. And he gives us specific guidelines. Why does he give us specific things to meditate, to ponder, to consider? to get our mind off of the other things that are destructive, to get us onto a constructive way of thinking rather than a destructive way of thinking, right? See, this isn't New Age. This is gospel. Jesus said, out of the heart come evil thoughts. And these are the things that defile a man, right? So Paul's just admonishing us right in agreement with Jesus in the gospel. Look, you got to change the way you think, right? All right, so first of all, in Romans, he talks to us about the intellect. And here he talks to us about our meditation. And then when we go over into Colossians chapter 3 and verse 2. Well, I'll read verse 1 so that you won't be confused. But if you were raised with Christ, and the word if there, remember, means for as much as you were raised with Christ, seek those things which are above, where Christ is sitting at the right hand of God. Now, how many of you believe that Jesus Christ is sitting on a throne out beyond Jupiter somewhere? No, see, that's not what this means when it talks about above, where Christ is seated. We always look up, and that's okay. I mean, you know, but above is a word. Well, I'll talk about it in just a minute. But don't get caught up in that out there thing. That way out there thing. That thing that has you imagining yourself upon your physical demise, shooting naked out through the cold airs of the atmosphere. There he goes. I bet he's cold. Right? Okay. All right. But verse 2, he says, set your mind. He says, set your mind on things above, not on things on the earth. Well, see, that just complicates the matter because now he's talking about the above and the below here, right? But first of all, the word set here is a word that means exercise. He's saying exercise the mind. It means to entertain and to interest yourself in. He says, so interest your mind in things above, not on things of the earth, right? All right? Set your mind, let me say it this way, set your mind on the above things, or the things that are above the ordinary, the things that are above, the higher things, not the lower things of the world, but the higher things, say, of God's will and intention for our lives. It's not out there stuff. It's right here stuff. It's a higher way of thinking. We talk about higher education. The people that are partaking of higher education, they're not out there somewhere going to school. You know what I'm saying? Caleb's partaking of higher education in theology right now, or whatever it is, linguistics and stuff. And every time I go to his house, he's there. When I heard he was going to get involved in higher education, I thought he was leaving. Of course, we don't think that way until we put something over here where we've been told that the Bible's all about going to heaven and avoiding hell, and that's the only story that's in here, right? All right, so he's saying, set your mind on the above things. Set your mind, now listen to me. This is what I'm hoping to produce in this series. Set your mind on being on top, not below. Set your mind on being on top. Set your mind on recovery. Set your mind on pulling out of this dive that you've been into all of your life. Say, set your mind on, entertain your mind, fill your mind with it, right? All right, on the higher things of your origin and your heritage. Set your mind on whose you are. Set your mind on, we are the offspring, the genos of God. I said, Jesus, I said, ye are gods, and all of you are sons of the Most High. What's he saying there? Each are the offspring of the Father. He's saying, Father created you. You came right out of the loins of Papa, right? That's all he's saying. He's not saying, oh, you exalted ones, in that sense. Okay? Look at 2 Corinthians 10:5. It's another one you know, but then we'll move on. Casting down arguments and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, bringing every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ. Casting down arguments, right? So just from these few passages, I said that they over and over again, I mean, there's so many more. I said that these New Testament writers were constantly addressing our thought processes, constantly giving us advice and admonition and exhortation to begin to allow ourselves to think new thoughts, to think differently than the religious system, than the social systems and the domination systems of the world. You have the freedom to think differently, see? So just from these few passages, we can see that, that the intellect, your choice of interests, what you meditate on, and your dealings with argumentative perceptions are vital. That's just in 4 passages we looked at, right? Now, no one can execute these things for you and me, right? And if we're going to have any do doctrines in the church, it can only be this. See, we're trying to get away from works, and that's in the wrong sense, okay? But if we're going to have a do doctrine, then it can only be this. Do make the necessary adjustments in our thinking to allow opportunity for our thoughts to create new expectations and experiences, right? I mean, I have had so many people over the years tell me, well, you're telling me I got to do something, when I tell them, believe what Jesus said. Well, that's works. No, it's not works. It's just taking the Creator at His word, taking someone who declares that He loves you unconditionally, that He loves all of humanity beyond our ability to comprehend, taking Him at His word. Okay? All right, now let's go to Romans 5, verses 3 and 4. Well, again, I'll read verse 2 first. Through whom also we have access by faith into this grace in which we stand, and we rejoice in the hope of the glory of God. Now, verse 3. And not only that, but we also glory in tribulations, knowing that tribulation produces perseverance, and perseverance, character, and character, hope. Most of us already know that the way I just read that out of the New King James is a crock. You know why we know that? Because tribulation has not produced, in most of us, perseverance. It's produced quitting. Okay? And quitting has done nothing for our character. So let me help you understand a little bit better. First of all, the word character. The word character is a really poor rendering here. The literal word that's translated character in the New King James is actually translated more correctly in the King James. It's the word proof or experience. Experience. And the word perseverance, and I won't go into all the way I arrived at this. I did a whole series on this a long time ago on patience and perseverance and stuff. But the word perseverance, which we would also think is gritting our teeth and just getting through the damn thing, right? We'll make it, you know. The word perseverance means cheerful. Everybody say cheerful. Constancy. That means being constantly cheerful. Uh-oh. All right, so we have the word, first of all, character, okay, that it means experience. So let me tell you what verse 4, and you can find versions that actually say this. Sometimes you have to put 2 of them together. One of them will say one thing, and one of them in another place will say a different one. But here's what verse 4 says. Cheerful constancy. Well, let me pick up where it, not only that, but we also glory in tribulation, knowing that tribulation produces cheerful constancy. Now stop and think, does that ring any familiar bells? In this world you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer, right? Okay, so let's kind of keep that in mind as we go here, all right? So he says, cheerful constancy produces experience, and experience generates confident expectation, which is hope, right? Get that? Changes kind of the way you read that verse, doesn't it? So in other words, what he's really saying is experience generates further experience in what? In this grace in which we stand. Cheerful constancy, Jesus said it too, produces experience, gives way to experience. All right? So now I want you to listen carefully to something, okay? It's important that we realize that tribulation isn't the tangible thing that we encounter in the moment. Let me let this sink in a second. I said something similar to this a while ago. I want you to get this. Tribulation is not is not the tangible thing that we experience in the moment, but rather tribulation is the stuff that occupies our thought processes way before the tangible, paving the way for the tangible. That makes sense? Hear what I'm saying? It's all that stuff I lay awake at night and meditate on, creating the expectation that will finally be fulfilled in the tangible, right? So you see, the tribulation is what keeps me awake at night. Jesus said, let not your hearts be troubled, and the word is tribulated there. Let not your hearts be tribulated. You believe in God, believe also in me. He said, let not your hearts be tribulated. Tribulation is a matter of the heart, right? So I want you to understand, the tribulation is not the moment. The tribulation is what led up to the moment. Okay. So as I said, in verse 3, Paul says the same thing Jesus said. In this world you'll have tribulation. Be of good cheer, I've overcome the world. Because here's what Paul says. Paul says that tribulation responds positively to cheerful constancy. You say, well, why constancy? Are we trying to, endure to please God so he'll finally move? No, constancy because of the environmental resistance of our old thinking. Why do I need to stand firm against it? Because of the environmental resistance and persistence of my old. How many of you, let's just take this one little series. How many of you are completely free of any old way of thinking just because I've spoke on this for 13 weeks? How many of you are foolish enough to believe that even though I've spoken on this now for maybe 40 years, that I'm completely free from my old way of thinking? See what I'm saying? Cheerful constancy. That make sense to you? That's why it needs to be constant, not so that God can finally say, okay, you've made it through. You've been cheerful. You've displayed the ability to be happy in the midst of tribulation and distress and struggle. So now I'm going to move in your behalf. No, that's not what it is at all. So that's why constancy is there, because our old way of thinking, as I've already said a while ago, comes back to haunt us. Wants to come back and jump on our, and it will even sometimes say things to you like, well, I know he did it once, but he won't do it this time. Right? Okay. You're all such a cooperative bunch. All right, so what's the basis then of the thought process that invokes cheerful constancy and pulls me into the intended experience of life? Well, as we saw last week, Jesus provided us with a specific principle that makes recovery predictable. And that's what I'm trying to communicate, is the predictability of recovery. All right? Now, remembering again that, that belief or persuasion constitutes, for all men, the environment of creativity, good or bad. We've already established that. Your persuasion constitutes the environment of creativity. I create from my persuasions, my own environment, right? So Jesus needed to refine that for us a little bit, right? And so here's what Jesus said. He that believeth in my name, or he that is persuaded in my name, will recover. See, Jesus refined it a little bit. He said, your persuasion creates, but here's the way you can predict recovery. He that is persuaded in my name. So that belief in me or belief in my name, my identity, is the predictable principle of recovery. All right? Now, here's what you need to understand. In me, in my name, these are statements of positional occupancy. The word en in the Greek, in in the English, is a word that refers to fixed position in time or place. In this case, both. Fixed position. So we're talking about immovable, fixed position, right? He that believeth that he is fixed and immovable in me and in my name, he will recover. Getting this? See, there are a lot of in him, in me, in my name, particularly in the Gospel of John, but Paul uses it too a lot. And when we don't understand what in really means, You see, most of us have the idea of in and out. And that's been brought to us by religion. Thank you, religion, right? You're in and out of the grace of God. You're in and out of the blessing of God. You're in and out of whatever. But in, as it's used in the Bible, okay? So what he's saying here is that those who are persuaded that he is in me, those who are persuaded that he is in me, will recover. And listen, I have discovered this in ministering to the sick and to the troubled and the disturbed over the last many years, you know. When it gets right down to it, there's the absence of persuasion. Some of them will tell you they can't be in him because they've done thus and such. Well, they committed adultery, or they smoked cigarettes, or they did this, or they did that. I mean, the stupidest things in the world I've heard that took them, and now I'm not saying adultery is stupid. I'm just saying for anything we do to have the capacity, the ability, the strength to take us out of the Savior of all men, the one who created this whole complex, simple redemption system. Complex in that it embraces all things. Simple because it's his doing, not ours, right? But anyway, so he's saying that he that is persuaded that he is in me. And this is not difficult for me to discern in myself at times and have to remind myself, wait a minute. Am I persuaded that I am in him and he is in me? John 17:23 says he's in me. I'm told that I am in him. He tells me many times that I am in him. But there are times when I question my occupancy, when I question the fixed, immovable place that I'm in, that he put me in, not that I put myself. See, part of the problem is we think we put ourselves in these places. We think we have something to do with where we are, mankind. We have nothing to do with it. Somebody say amen. Okay, I just want to know if you're awake. I don't really care if you agree with me. I just want to know if you're awake. Okay? All right, so let's take this a little bit further now, remembering what we got here. Okay? Go with me over to Acts chapter 3 and verse 16. Now we're going to just... All right, I'm going to read Acts 3:16 out of the New King James Bible first, okay? And his name, now you know about this is the healing of the guy at the temple, the lame man, okay? And his name, referring to Jesus, through faith in his name, has made this man strong, whom you see and know. Yes, the faith which comes through him has given him this perfect soundness in the presence of you all. Now, we've all heard that verse, I'm sure, many times. Now, if you'll allow me to read this out of a literal translation, here's what it says. Now, listen carefully, and then I'm going to read it as it is, and then I'm going to take some things out of it that are a bit distracting at the moment, okay? So it says the faith, and I'm going to use the word persuasion. The persuasion, now notice it says, of the name of him. Doesn't say in right now. Now, in is applicable, but of is important to us right now. The faith of the name of him, this one, whom you behold and know, made strong. The name of him and the persuasion through him gave to him complete soundness. All right, let me take some stuff out of this because I know that's... So here's the first thing he says. He says, the faith of the name of him, and then he points to the man and says, this one made strong. Or we can just say it this way. The faith of the name of him made this one strong, right? So we're just going to take out the whom you behold and know, right? Then he said the name of him and the persuasion. All right, so I want you to get this first of all. He says the persuasion of the name of him, this one made strong. That's suggesting here that there's a persuasive influence on our infirmity in the name, right? He said the persuasion of the name. Not in the name now here. Not in the name here, but of the name. The persuasion of the name. That name has persuasive influence. Persuasive influence over infirmity, all right? He said the name of him and the persuasion through him gave this man complete soundness. Now, We're going to refer back to this. Keep your hands here. But now, same event. Just go over to chapter 4 with me. They're still giving account of what happened to a different group of people now. And in verse 9, if Peter starts up making this statement, if we this day are judged for a good deed done to a helpless man, by what means he has been made well. So let's just do this. Let's get the question out of verse 9. Here's the question out of verse 9. By what means has he been made well? Now, this is the same guy that Peter was just talking about over in chapter 3 and verse 16. Okay? By what means has he been made well? Now, the answer is in verse 12 that we looked at last week, but I want you to listen very carefully because we're going to destroy a whole lot of what you think verse 12 says. Okay? I hope you're open to new ways of thinking. All right? Let's go down to verse 12. I'll read the whole thing first of all. Nor is there salvation in any other, for there is no other name under heaven given among men by which we must be saved. All right. We'll get some of that in a minute. First of all, I want you to get these words out of verse 12. Okay? Because I said, he's asked in verse 9, the question is, by what has he been made well? Okay? And then we find Peter saying this in verse 12. There is no other name under heaven given among men. I just want you to take that one right now. There is no other name under heaven given among men. Now, we're going to change something here, and we're going to change it correctly. Am I saying I'm right and they're wrong? Yes, I am. Okay? Because you see, we all know that biblical translators, especially in modern days where it's important that we get our scripture lining up with our church doctrine, else the Bible will not be published by our publishing house, right? Okay, the word that is translated among here is the same word we were just talking about a while ago, the Greek word en, which means a fixed position, all right? Refers to occupancy. And here's what the verse actually says. There is no other name under heaven given in men. Given where? In men. Not among men, but in men. So there's a difference. It's not here just floating around out here for you to lay hold of it, grab it. He's saying there's no other name under heaven given in men. The word given here means to put or to place or to bestow. There is no other name under heaven placed in men. Do you see the transition here? We're making a transition from the name that he bore becoming the name that the man bore, that men bear. You hearing that? There is no other name under heaven. So this name, right? Okay. Under heaven, given in men. Now, this word, we've talked about this word that's translated among a few other times. 1,902 times en is translated in. Only 117 times is it translated among. Just the ratio itself says something. And we've dealt with it in a couple of other passages over the years where the evidence of the passage is in, not among. Right? And here is a place where this word definitely should have been translated in, but it has been translated among because evangelical Christianity, fundamentalist Christianity, wants to go along and say, whereby you must be saved. And if you don't submit to that must, you ain't saved. And of course, saved to them always means going to heaven, not going to hell. It doesn't mean anything else. That's the only thing it can possibly mean in the mind of an evangelical. I know I was one. Until our daughter was healed. And then it began to come out. I began to see some things about salvation that were different than just the little tiny box I had it in. Well, anyway. Okay. So let's put these together now. Chapter 3, verse 16 in this. You don't have to go back over there. But so the name given in this man, chapter 4 and verse 12. So the name given in this man made this man strong. Remember what it said? Well, listen to me now. Now let's go back. The persuasion of the name of him made this one strong. The persuasion of the name in him. See? The persuasion. Are you persuaded? So this name, let's go on with this. This name, the only name, listen to me carefully, the only name under heaven put in men. Did you hear that? Now listen. Think about this. Prior to the revelation of Jesus Christ, the only name in men under heaven was assumed to be Adam. Isn't that right? We see that played out for us when Paul talks about the first man and the second man, and he's got the old Adam of the garden and Jesus of Nazareth as the two men. And he's got a first Adam and he's got a last Adam. So prior to Jesus, the revelation of Jesus, the revelation of the Father's truth in Jesus, grace and truth came by him. And so prior to that, the only name under heaven given in men was assumed to be Adam. Now, Paul tells us in Ephesians 1:4 that humanity was chosen in him before the foundation of the world, right? And Peter now is telling us also that there's no other name under heaven given in men. So what am I saying? I'm saying that once again we are confronting deception with reality. Isn't that right? Because here's what happened. Deception changed man's name in his own mind. What did man say? I am naked, right? What does I am naked mean? I've lost my identity. I no longer see myself in him. I no longer see myself basking in the glory of God that all men were crowned with, right? I've lost my identity. And then Paul tells us in Galatians, you were one time enemies and aliens in your mind. But now he has reconciled or brought you back to right thinking in Christ. You getting this? Thank you, Craig. Appreciate that. All right. Now, remember, we talked about this last week a little bit. Some of you weren't here, but when it says must be saved, now this is the thing that the church has bore down on us with as we've gone door to door or been the victims of door-to-door evangelism at some time in our life, you know. But the must be saved is not a requirement that is placed upon man. This must be saved is a declaration of the predictable nature of the name of Christ, the name of Jesus in man. In other words, the burden of sozo is fully upon the name. Did you get that? I want you to get this. The burden of sozo is fully upon the name given man. But, okay, as Peter said over in chapter 3, it's the persuasion of that name in you under heaven, right, that gives complete soundness. Is this making sense to you? I know I'll tell you what, when we start, I know, I was talking with, somebody a long time ago, and they said, oh, you just make Scripture say whatever you want to. Well, there's a truth to that. I'll agree to that, you know. But you see, the thing is, we're dealing with Scripture that has been made to say whatever they wanted it to say, too. Isn't that right? Now, I know I'm a long ways from understanding, you know, things like linguistics and so on and so forth. But I tell you what I know. I know my Father is good. And, you know, Caleb said I am sort of a theologian. I'm a pastoral theologian. I'm telling you, if theology can be reduced to a simple terminology like the logic of theo, the logic of God, well, to me, the logic of God is that he's good, right? And that he loves all of mankind, regardless of their behaviors. He loves all of mankind. I love all of my children, regardless of their behaviors. I would never stop loving my children, regardless of their behaviors. I would never stop doing anything and everything I possibly could to redeem them or to bring them into a place of peace, right? But anyway, all right, so I got to ask you, are we persuaded? Let's go back to this. As I said, the burden of sozo is fully upon the name and the man. So really, what Paul was saying, that this man has become Peter was saying, this man has been persuaded of the name in him. How long did it take you to become persuaded of the name Kathy in you? Or Kent? See? or Vaughn or anybody else. See, the minute you began to hear it, you began to relate to it when you were little, right? And pretty soon you were answering to that name. And Peter's saying the persuasion of the name is what gave this man complete soundness. Oh, he said, well, he couldn't be because this wasn't a church attender. This was just an old lame guy sitting around. You know what? We have gotten ourselves so far off base with our you got to be in church to get it right type of thing. You can see that by all the people who don't come to church here to get it right. But anyway, all right, so let's go over to Philippians, and I'm through with this one. Let's go over to Philippians 2:9 real quick. But see, I have to ask, are we persuaded of less than? Are we persuaded of less than, that name in us? Probably we are, because the church has been busy persuading us of less than. God doesn't share his glory with anybody. Too late, he already did. People don't understand glory, and that's the reason they say things like that. God doesn't share his glory. God is so holy, he cannot look upon sin. Then that divorces God from Jesus totally, doesn't it? See, there's so many stupid things we say in the church. And like that old boy says on comedy thing, you can't fix stupid. Philippians 2:9. Therefore, well, I'll read verse 8 again, because we was talking about Jesus taking the form of a bondservant in the likeness of man, being found in appearance as a man. He humbled himself and became obedient to the point of death. Even that word means also the death of the cross. Therefore, God also has highly exalted him and given him the name which is above every name, right? Now, the word above here, again, some of the definitions are very recognizable. Means beyond, means superior to, means more than, but listen to this one. It means instead of every name. He has given him the name that is instead of every name. Now, why did he give him the name? Because the name was to be given to man, right? There is no other name under heaven given in men, right, than the name of Jesus, right? There is no other name under heaven given in men but this name. And so he gave him this name that is instead of every name. The name, instead of every name, deception has tried to label you with. Right? And that name is the only name under heaven given in men. See, the name of Adam, in the sense that we think of it, was never a valid identity for humanity in truth. The Adamic concept that the church has proclaimed. And sadly, it remains today, as an assumed identity by the exclusion church. Right? But it was never a valid identity in terms of men saying, I'm in Adam. And so therefore, because I'm in Adam, I'm a fallen, worthless, useless, unloved, unaccepted. I'm an unbeliever. I believe in all the uns. Right? So as we saw, Paul said, casting down arguments that exalt against the knowledge of God. And that first and foremost then means casting down the names you've allowed deception to label you with. Adam. I remember when I first came back from Vietnam, I went to a Baptist church here in this town, and they told me that if I got out of bed on the right side of the bed in the morning, I was Jesus. If I got out of bed and went drinking with the fellas, I was Adam. So I was this distorted, I didn't know who I was. I had the Adamic nature part of the time. I had the Adamic, the Christ nature when I was a good guy, when I prayed and did my devotions and stuff. See, so, and there were a few places that I went where I was familiar with this dualism, that you could be both on any given day and within any given moment. I could start off giving somebody a testimony of why they needed to receive Jesus, and they rejected me. I could get mad at them. And I went from being Jesus to being the devil, or Adam, right? Now, come on, this is the way things are. This is how stupid we've been in Christianity. And we wonder why the world is not beating down our doors, right? But anyway. But as I said, so the names that we've allowed deception to label us with. We've allowed deception to label us with sinner. Wait a minute. Behold the Lamb of God which taketh away the sin of the church. No, the sin of the world. Bible tells us what sin consciousness does to us over in the book of Hebrews. And yet we've let the name sinner be attached to us. Failure. Diabetic. There's a name, but there's a name that's instead of every name. And the persuasion of that name is what gives a man complete wholeness, complete soundness. I'm getting a lot out of this. I don't know. But anyway, casting down or breaking away, from thought patterns that have sucked us into infirmity demands that our assumed identities give way to truth. And because you see, it's the name given in men that must save, heal, rescue, and protect. That's the law of recovery. And it's, listen to this word carefully now, it's effortless. I didn't say it was easy. I said that it is not responsive to effort. That means it's effortless. So all the effort we put into it doesn't do it. It's not easy to do, I know, because what we're trying to do, we're trying to break away, inconstancy from the resistance of the old way of thinking. So it ain't easy, but it's effortless. It won't respond to your efforts. Got it? I'm not even going to ask you because I got a lot out of it. Father, thank you today